Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Food, Wine, and Travel Show, where we go across country and travel the world with members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. Let's go. Welcome, everyone. Every second Tuesday, we like to talk to different destinations across the country and around the world here on our Big Blend Radio Food, Wine, and Travel Show with the International Food, Wine, and Travel Writers Association. Now, last year, 2024, they had their conference up in upstate New York. So we thought, hey, we've got to cover New York, not just the city of New York City, which is iconic around the world, but we want to hear more about the state. In fact, we've been doing a lot of stories over the years. And so we're very excited to have Executive Director of the New York State Division of Tourism, Ross Levi, here. So welcome to the show, Ross. How are you?
I'm great. Great to be with you.
So, New York City is iconic, right? It's probably one of the most iconic cities in the world. Everyone knows where New York City is, but you want people to know that there's so much to the state, right? So it's 11 regions for people to explore, right?
That's right. We divide the state up into 11 different regions. New York City is one of those. But the other 10 have all kinds of wonders and amazing things as well. From New York City, it's very easy to do a day trip via commuter rail out to, for example, Long Island and be on some of the world's best beaches. Or to go to the Hamptons, or to see where The Great Gatsby was written. I know we'll be talking about that, and see those Gold Coast mansions that still exist to be toured. Or you could go north of the city and go into the Hudson Valley, which again was the playground of the rich and famous for many years, and you could view the historic homes of the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts, but also great culinary experiences with the Culinary Institute of America and amazing views of the Hudson River. You go a little west of there, you're in the Catskills. If you've seen Dirty Dancing or The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, you have a sense of what the Catskills are. Woodstock was there as well. And it's had a real sort of renaissance over the last few years with sort of boutique hotels and resorts and things. Then you go north of there and you can be in the Capital District, in the Albany area, Saratoga, the home of America's oldest sporting venue, the Saratoga Racecourse. North of there, you're in the Adirondacks, right on the border of Canada, which is the largest protected land in the lower 48 states. You could take the Yellowstone, Grand Teton, Everglades, the Grand Canyon. It would all fit in there. It's huge. And it's also where the Winter Olympics have been held twice, in the Lake Placid area. Right next to there is the Thousand Islands. There are literally 1,000 islands, actually 1,900 of them. Two of them have castles that you can tour. Otherwise, there's great fishing, great boat rides. You continue into New York State, you're in central New York. Cooperstown is there with the Baseball Hall of Fame and some really great museums as well. And it's known very much for its craft breweries. And so there's some great craft beverage tours to take there. The Finger Lakes is next to that, known, of course, for its wines. Thanks to those amazing 11 Finger Lakes. They're called Finger Lakes because they look like fingers on a hand. It's actually based on a Native American story of the great creator, I believe, put one finger in to test the soil and liked it so much to put all 10 fingers down, and that's why there's 11 lakes there. Isn't that a great story? Then in the far western part of the state, you have the Chautauqua-Allegheny region, which is the home of the National Comedy Center. It's kind of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame of comedy. It's in Lucille Ball's hometown of Jamestown, but also a lot of really pastoral countryside to tour, and these areas of rock formations that you can hike around and walk around. And then, of course, the greater Niagara region, known for Niagara Falls and Buffalo, the home of Buffalo Wings. As I always remind people.
Oh, that's important.
Well, of course, buffalo wings don't come off of buffaloes; they come from buffaloes. So, and you could tour the place where they were invented, the Anchor Bar in Buffalo as well. So that's a very quick tour of our vast state.
I think we got to do a road trip. We did a road trip through. We were driving from Connecticut to Michigan, and had not done New York at all. But we've done interviews and travel writers in our magazines, and we travel full time documenting parks and public lands. Now I'm like, okay, we need to go. We need to come back and visit. But it was absolutely gorgeous, and the history that we discovered We went to Seneca Falls, so you've got this women's history. We saw the Erie Canal, and that's some important history I want to touch on because that was, as I recall, America's superhighway, the very
It,
first superhighway, right?
Absolutely. In a physical sense, it'll be celebrating the 200th year of its completion this year in 2025, bicentennial of the Erie Canal. And so in a very physical sense, yes, it opened the West. It made westward expansion possible. Because if you think about it, how back in those days are you going to get from England to the middle of the United States? Well, you're going to come through New York Harbor, you go up the Hudson River, then what? Then what was the Erie Canal, which then took you to the Great Lakes, which brought you to the rest of the United States. But it was also, I've heard people refer to it as the internet of its age, because it wasn't just transporting goods, it was transporting people, and as a result, transporting ideas. And there are many that think the reason the women's rights movement in the United States was born in New York, as you mentioned in Seneca Falls, is because of the Erie Canal. The reason the abolitionist movement was so strong here with Frederick Douglass and others was because of the Erie Canal. The reason Mormonism exists is because of the Erie Canal, because that's where John Smith, that all happened in upstate New York. So this idea of transporting goods and transporting ideas shows how important that waterway has been, not just to the history of New York, but to the entire United States.
And when you look at also Stonewall, that's some iconic history too that we've got to look at. That's also still one of our newer national park units as well. Still kind of new, you
Well,
know?
yeah. Well, it's still the only national park dedicated to LGBTQ rights and the LGBTQ community. And that, as a visitor experience, was greatly enhanced last year with the opening of the new Stonewall Visitor Center. It's actually not run by the national park. It's run by an independent nonprofit, but they're very much collaborating with the national park system. Up until now, Stonewall was the bar, a commercial bar, which is still running, a great place to go. But you get there during the day, you get there with kids, that's not really giving you the experience you're looking to have. There's now this amazing visitor center with artifacts that is actually represents the first time that the original Stonewall Bar has been unified. For years, the Stonewall Bar we know of today is actually only half of what the Stonewall was before. Well, now that original bar, which is actually where the bar was, what you saddled up to get a drink, that space is now this visitor center, and they have programming
That's cool.
throughout the year. It's a great place.
That's awesome. I think the one thing when you look at the entire state, obviously New York City is known for Broadway and the shows, right? And just music history. I mean, Greenwich Village has got so much of that, right? And then when you look beyond there, like you were talking about Woodstock, that's iconic. I mean, everyone's just still, you can't, and no one could really duplicate Woodstock. Even when they tried to do it again, it didn't work. It just is, everyone tried. I mean, Altamont, they tried to do that. That wasn't a, that didn't, that ended a little rough as a concert. But I've done so many musician interviews from upstate New York, and including Woodstock. Levon Helm's got his studio up there. I've got friends who've recorded with
Yeah,
him. It's like, wow, the music history of this state, comedy history. When you look at Lucille Ball and the comedians that come from there in theater, and then all the writers, Mark Twain and F. Scott Fitzgerald. We talk about the Great Gatsby. I mean, so the arts that could for and movies. Oh,
yeah.
you got movies.
Well, yeah, one of the things we talk about is, obviously New York City is a cultural capital of the world, but there are ways to see and experience the arts outside of New York City that you can't even experience in New York City, right? That to be under the stars in an outdoor amphitheater, like at the Saratoga Performing Arts Center, which is the summer home of the Philadelphia Orchestra and the New York City Ballet, or at Woodstock, which is now called the Bethel Woods Center for the Arts, which has a museum of the 60s, this really great museum, state-of-the-art museum that really gives you a sense of what that event was like, and in fact, what that whole period of time was like in America. And then it has an outdoor amphitheater as well, where you could see modern acts of all kinds. That you have these beautiful old vaudeville houses in the capital region, for example, in Albany and Troy, New York, where you can see these amazing, these historic the Troy Music Hall, for example, is a historic venue. It's been around since the 1800s. And it is one of the most acoustically correct spaces in the world because there wasn't amplified sound when it was open. And so now you can see classical music or comedians or all kinds of other things there. Similar in, you have Shays in upstate New York, Rochester, Buffalo. They each have their own amazing venues. So yeah, it's really great to think of the arts beyond just what's available in the city.
Yeah, and the Mark Twain history. That to me is just that's cool.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
frankly, I didn't know this until I had this job, but you hear Mark Twain and you imagine him lying on the banks of the Mississippi writing his stories, but you find out that
paddle
he,
boats. Yeah.
yeah, and you find out that he did it in, Elmira, New York. And in fact, that's where he's buried. He's buried in New York
Mhm.
State. And that you can go to the Octagon studio. It's still preserved and you could visit it. It's just a small little building that he did, some of his best known stories in. So yeah, we have tons of stories like that across New York State.
The history too is really exceptional. We've done a lot of historicals interviews with historians talking even about how slavery came in and because of the shipping and the maritime history that you have. And then when you think about the Erie Canal and how it connects to the Great Lakes, so there's got to be something that happened even in I'm thinking back in the War of 1812 had to have some kind of impact on all of this
Oh
with
yeah,
water.
and with America 250 coming in 2026, I think
Mm.
people are even going to discover more of New York's important role. Saratoga, the Saratoga battlefield, which is a National Historic Site, that was the turning point of the Revolution. There would be no America if it wasn't for Saratoga. George Washington ordered the Continental Congress troops in New York. The Washington headquarters is a state historic site in the Hudson Valley that you could visit and walk on the steps that he walked on. And we actually have a whole program called Path Through History, which takes about 400 different historic sites across New York State and divides them up into themes, everything from the American Revolution to women's rights to sports history, everything, you name it. And it's a really great way for people to care about history and want to go experience it, to see what we have, where it is, and how they could get to it and go experience it.
Wow. And so when you think about the history, so America, that's going to be a big year next year. Are you guys partying all year? Like, are you going to have festivals? What's going on? I
Yes,
can
and
already
and
imagine.
beyond, and beyond. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be huge marquee events. For example, Sail Forth is going to be a parade of tall ships in New York City on July 4th. So that's going to be amazing. And people like me who are old enough to remember the bicentennial in 1976 can remember the one that happened then. This is going to be basically a redoubling of that, which I think is a really big deal. But there's going to be things all across New York State. Like I said, those Path Through History attractions are going to be hosting things across the state. Attractions like Fort Ticonderoga, which is in the Adirondacks and was a really important strategic site, known for the 1775 capture by Ethan Allen. The Washington headquarters I mentioned, Francis Tavern in New York City, Old Fort Niagara and in the greater Niagara area, which controlled the access between the Great Lakes and the Atlantic because of where it was strategically located. All of these sites are going to be having all kinds of events across the state. There's going to be special exhibitions. So yeah, we're expecting a lot of folks to come and experience that.
This is going to be big. So people should start making plans, but still go out and experience this year. Tell us a little bit about the seasonal highlights because I know you got a lot of sports. So do most of the sporting events take place in the summer, but then you got Lake Placid. So the winter, yeah,
Yeah,
you're sporting it all year round.
absolutely. Don't forget the Buffalo Bills and the Sabres, playing hockey up in Buffalo. And yeah, I mean, Lake Placid is one of the few places in the world to have held the Winter Olympics twice. They just redid their Olympic museum. It's really spectacular. In addition to that museum, you can actually go to the sites where history took place. The Miracle on Ice, where the U.S. beat Russia. That took place in Lake Placid. You could go and skate on that ice. If you've heard of Eric Heiden, the Olympic speed skater, you could go skate on that Olympic oval. Yeah, you can go to the top of an Olympic ski jump, and thankfully, you don't get to slide down it, but you get to look at least and see what it's like to do those crazy long ski jumps. And sometimes you get a tour by a future Olympian, people that are in training there. And if you want, you can take a zip line from the top of that ski jump all the way down. So at least you could get that sense. And it's actually one of the few places in the world where an amateur can bobsled. You can take the actual bobsled track
Oh, that's cool.
there. And so there's all these great Olympic history there as well. But yeah, we have major league, minor league sports happening around the state all year round. So yeah, and certainly the Baseball Hall of Fame is here. The International Boxing Hall of Fame is here. The Thoroughbred Racing Hall of Fame is here. So, it's a sports lover's paradise here in New York.
So yeah, and then I want to talk also about what's coming up in 2026, the World Cup for football. Are you kidding me? Listen, I grew up in South Africa, Kenya, and England, and that is everybody stops. Like
Well, yeah,
that's a big deal.
and what was such interesting news to me is that the majority of people who travel for the World Cup don't go to the game. They don't have tickets to the game. They're coming to just be a part of the excitement. And New York is very much going to have that. We're going to be hosting two of the games, including the final, the championship game. So that's very exciting on July 19th. But during that time, we also know that there's going to be viewing parties in the New York City and across the state. We know that some people are going to come for the earlier game and then stay for a few weeks and hoping that their team makes the final. And so we're excited then to experience the rest of the state while we're here. But so basically between June 8th and July 19th, we know the state is going to be very focused on this and welcoming all those people that we know are coming around the world to experience the World Cup.
So really, people need to start planning now, like honestly, because it's coming. And
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, don't wait till the last minute. That's not going to happen. And this is right after the 4th of July. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
you've got a
2020. I
big
mean,
year. You've got a
it's
big
two
year.
big years, right? So 2025 is, as we said, the bicentennial of the Erie Canal. It's the 100th anniversary of the writing of The Great Gatsby. That took place on Long Island. Like I said, those historic mansions are still there to tour. Some of them you could even stay overnight. But there's a lot of great events happening around that that are happening in New York State. You had mentioned the PGA Ryder Cup, which is coming to Long Island also in 2025 at Bethpage Black Course on Long Island. It's one of the few public courses where the PGA happens. And the Ryder Cup happens every 2 years with European playing US teams, and it moves from Europe to the US. And New York is one of the few places to have held that twice, once in Rochester and now in Long Island. So we know a lot of people are coming for that as well. So that's our busy 2025. 2026, we're actually hosting the NHL All-Star Game on Long Island at the UBS Arena. Then we mentioned the World Cup. There's some chance that we may be hosting the Winter Olympics. Now that's taking place in Italy, but there is some concern that the bobsledding and luge may not be ready in Italy. And if not, Lake Placid has officially been chosen as the alternate site for those events for the 2026 Olympics. So that may be there yet as well. And then yes,
Wow.
America 250. So 2 very busy years ahead.
Wow. And so I want to give everyone the website for them to start planning. And when you go on there, you're going to be sucked into a vortex of joy and you're going to want to plan. So go to iloveny.com, and that's LOVE, iloveny.com. And every time I say I love New York, I start hearing that song, I Love New York in June. How about you?
A lot of people
So
do, yeah.
it just goes and it takes me back to the movie Fisher King. I don't, it just takes me back to that. If there's a scene in there, but anyway, let's talk. You talked about, wineries and, up in the Finger Lakes region, all the breweries as well. But I also understand that New York State has, a wonderful small farm agricultural scene as well. So when you think about farm to table food, that this is also a big deal.
Oh yeah, it sure is. I mean, New Yorkers love food. We have a lot of regional foods that people in upstate New York may know, but not even people in New York City necessarily know. Sure, everyone knows buffalo wings because that is a regional specialty, but
Yeah,
now it's
yeah.
become an international specialty. But not everybody knows about chicken riggies, which it stands for chicken rigatoni, which is rigatoni in a spicy tomato cream sauce with chunks of chicken. Or a speedy, which is a particular type of sandwich that's made on a particular type of bun, or salt potatoes, which are famous
Yeah, what's up with
here.
this? I saw someone posting this on Facebook the other day. Salt potatoes dipped in hot butter. Is this what it
Yeah,
is?
it's what they sound like. It's basically small potatoes boiled in salty water, so they retain that salty flavor,
Mm.
and then you just put butter on it. And people, and like they're served at the state fair, but around other
Ooh.
parts of New York State, people love it. There's actually in Rochester, it doesn't sound appetizing, but people love it. It's called a garbage plate. It was created at a bar called Nick Tahoe's, and when the college kids would come late at night, They basically took a French fry base and put everything on it. It could be meat sauce, it could be gravy, it could be all kinds of things. And people in Rochester have different versions of their garbage plate they love. But yeah, certainly, there's also, of course, the fine dining experiences. I mentioned the Culinary Institute of America in the Hudson Valley. Just down the street from there, last year opened Desai Sake Brewery, which is a company that has been making small batch sake in Japan for ages. This is the first time they've done it outside the United States, outside of Japan, and that's in the Hudson Valley. Throughout New York State, we have wine trails, we have craft brewing trails. We have an Upstate Eats trail that takes you to the places where these regional specialties are from. So there's so many amazing culinary experiences.
I've heard that ice cream is a big deal up in the Corning, Steuben area. Ice cream, and of course you want to go to Corning Glass Museum. That's a
Yeah,
icon too.
well,
I
I
mean, that
can't.
changed the world,
Well,
you know.
before I get to Corning, I can't pass over. You can't expect me to just pass over ice cream, can you? I mean, no.
No.
Because people don't realize that how important the dairy industry is to New York State. That we're one of the largest dairy producers in the nation. As a matter of fact,
Wow.
we're the nation's largest producer of yogurt. But for other types of dairy, we're close as well. It's mainly because we have all that beautiful farmland in upstate New York.
Yeah.
So you go to places like Purity Ice Cream in Ithaca that's been making ice cream on site for decades. You go to any town in New York and you ask them what their favorite ice cream place is, they'll be able to tell you. And in most cases, though, you have to be there in summer because they're seasonal. They're only open like from April to October type thing. But yeah, we have ice cream everywhere. Love it. But yes,
Oh,
Corning Museum for sure. The Corning Museum of Glass shows the history, science, and art of glass making. That's actually a lot to cover, right? Because they have glass going back to Egyptian times, all the way up through Tiffany glass and Italian Murano glass. But they also talk about fiber optics and Gorilla Glass. The reason we have cell phones is because the people in Corning knew how to make a glass strong enough, and Steve Jobs went to them. They showed him how to
wow.
make glass to put on a phone that won't break, right? Really
Wow.
important. But also at that museum, they have people making glass throughout the day. You can watch the master gaffers creating masterworks throughout the day. You could see beautiful works of glass in this beautiful gallery with an opaque glass ceiling where the lighting changes throughout the day. So the works of art actually change depending on the light. And you can make your own works of glass too. You can do glass blowing. You could work
That's
with
fun.
hot flame glass work and take your own works of glass home.
That's cool. And see light bulbs. That's the thing to me. To be like, this is the light bulb.
Well,
Like,
not just any light bulb. I mean, they bring into context the idea of movie lights and railroad
mm,
lights, right? Because that took a certain type of glass back when the technology wasn't what it is today. How do you make a light that's focused enough and bright enough? Well, you do it with glass. And so they actually have a demonstration of how glass has been used to refract light in a certain way that's been so important for so many
mm.
industries.
Wow. Okay, and then you got this is a lot. And seafood because you've got the water, right? So there's fish, seafood, all of that good stuff too. So now
Yeah, especially Long
nature.
Island, obviously,
Yeah.
right? People do know that Long Island's on the Atlantic Ocean, but again, I don't think they remember that that's in New York State, and you have some amazing
Oh, that's
seafood.
true. Mm. Nature's a biggie because hiking, you've got skiing, but then what about, like spring waterfalls? I know Steuben County, they've always like talk about waterfalls, and of course you got Niagara Falls, so like you got the biggie. So waterfalls, wildflowers. Tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about the seasonal and fall. Do you get the fall colors, right? You've got
well,
to.
sure. Oh yeah, oh my God. Yeah, we have actually the longest foliage season of any state in the nation, partially because of our
Oh,
size, but also because of our topography. It starts early in the higher elevations, like the Adirondacks and the Catskills, as early as
mhm.
September, and then it ends in places like Long Island and New York in November. So basically, between September and November, somewhere in New York is at peak. And we actually keep a fall foliage map at ilovenewyork.com that's updated weekly during the fall season. So it's an amazing, and that's in addition to, the apple orchards, the pick your own apples, and the hay rides, and the pick your own pumpkins, and the cider donuts, and the fresh apple
Mm.
cider at, orchards across the state. So Fall, frankly, is my favorite season in general, and certainly in New York State.
Mm.
The temperatures, are cool at night, but during the day, kind of in the 50s with a bright sun and a beautiful blue
Mm.
sky. So that hiking, you're not sweating as much, and I think it's a great time to experience the year. Spring is getting to be a more popular season too, and similar to that fall foliage map, we actually just started a program where we look at the flowers that are blooming, a spring blooms program, where weekly we are
Ooh.
doing a report on what flowers are blooming where in New York State. And not so much in the wild, but taking a look at the botanical gardens, the arboretums,
Oh,
the
cool.
historic gardens we have across New York State as well. So that's another great way to experience the outdoors. But I mean, just in general, I mentioned the Adirondacks, but places like Watkins Glen, which is a gorge that you walk. It's a state park that you walk along
Hmm.
this gorge on a very well maintained stone path. Actually, it was created during the WPA, and in just about an hour and a half, you are walking around, among, and even behind like 20 different waterfalls in this beautiful gorge.
Mm.
And we have
Wow.
tons of, this year was actually the anniversary of our state park system. We have the oldest state park in America, which is Niagara Falls State Park, but we have, over 100 state parks where you get to experience the outdoors in New York State.
What about accessibility? It's something we've been focusing on with what we do with parks is, a lot of times people, when we first started our tour, were saying, oh, well, I'm not an athlete, so I don't, there's not much for me in national parks. I'm like, dude, what? Uh, there's always an accessible trail or something. So, but as a state, whether it's the cities and, in the towns, are there programs? I know one community we know, the whole community got together and worked with folks that are coming in with in I would say invisible disabilities. So they've been doing all these programs. Has the state done any initiatives for that?
We sure do. We have an Accessible
Mm.
New York program at I Love New York. And
Oh.
if you go to our website, what we've done is collected information from hundreds of attractions across New York State. So that can include museums, but also includes hotels, et cetera, et cetera. And we've gotten very detailed information on their accessibility. So that's not just saying we're ADA compliant. It's actually, we've got people
Mm.
with tape measures that are measuring the space between a bed and a wall, because folks with accessibility issues have told us that what they really need is information. They know how to navigate their world. They'll make accommodations for themselves in many cases, but they need accurate information that they can rely on. So that is a really great program, and then gets to highlight those programs, attractions, education that is specifically targeted for people with accessibility needs. I mentioned the state parks.
Mm.
Letchworth State Park in Western New York, which is known as the Grand Canyon of the East, launched an autism nature trail that's specifically
Oh.
designed for people with sensory abilities, but is really cool, really, for anybody. There are places that have adaptive skiing in New York State.
Mm.
There are places that have, low sensory days. The New York State Fair does that at the Midway for a certain period of time while the fair is going on, for people that are going to be overwhelmed by the lights and noise and things. So the Accessible New York program
Mm.
has information on the attractions and the
Mm.
events and the different programming that exists for people with different types of accessibility needs.
That's awesome. That is really awesome. I think we're coming a long way in the country with it, and it's glad to hear what's happening in New York State
Yeah,
and that you
and
have that in one spot for everyone.
yeah,
You
sure.
know.
And I mean, not only is it a great thing to do and the right thing to do, we're we're based at New York State's Economic Development Agency, so we care about economic development. The truth is, it's a very lucrative and important travel segment. Folks will travel around the world to have a good experience when they have accessibility issues, and we want to make sure that they know that New York is chock full of them.
Speaking of economics, let's look at small town America because a lot of people want that feeling, especially our international visitors coming over. They hear that term and they go, okay, where is it? Of course, we have big box stores all over the place, right? And so there's that familiar part, right? And not knocking it, just saying that's just, we know what we're getting. But what about going into like a mom and pop shop, like a boutique or a gallery or even an old mercantile store? I don't know if they're all just in the West, but I don't think so. So
No.
what about that level? Where would you recommend people? Because even the city's going to have small
Yeah,
business, right?
absolutely. Well, the first place I would refer to is our Department of State Parks, which is actually the Office of Historic Preservation as well.
Okay.
has actually started a registry of small historic businesses in New York State. These are businesses that have been around
Oh,
for more than 50 years and are a part of the fabric of their community. Now, some of them are not necessarily going to be important to visitors, if it's a funeral parlor or a manufacturing, but many of them are stores or restaurants or, I'm even interested in seeing a historic hardware store if I go into the right community. So that's a great place to start because there are hundreds of businesses that are registered there in communities all across New York State. But the other thing, on ilovenewyork.com, we have a lot of information on, it's kind of small town Americana, to go to Rhinebeck, New York, to go to Nyack, to go to these cute little towns, whether they're in the Hudson Valley, to go to Ellicottville in Western New York. Even Saratoga, New York has a beautiful main street. And almost all of these main streets, that's not where Walmart is, frankly, right?
mhm.
That's where you're going to find the local clothing store, an old penny candy store.
I want
Um,
that.
yeah, right. Small little individually owned restaurants, farm to table cuisine. So we have all these really cute walkable downtowns and main streets across New York State that will give you that small experience.
That antiquing and everything. And going back to America, celebrating 250 years, when you think of everyone coming in, moving in, um, and being entrepreneurs, that's part of the American spirit, the American dream, right? Is running a shop, running a deli, running all these different things,
Yeah.
bakeries, you name it. And we're so multicultural that it's, when we look at small town America, I look at the entrepreneurial sport, that spirit. And
Oh
so
yeah.
I think that should be something we all look at in, celebrating America.
Well, yeah, and interesting that Path Through History program I was talking about. One of the themes is innovation, because so much came from New York, right? The people that came up with new ideas, new inventions, new ways of doing things, and so we highlight that through our history. But you mentioned sort of antiquing and getting in touch with that history. We have so many interesting opportunities for that in New York too. There's the high-end antiquing experience, for example, in Hudson, New York. Its main drag has some of the best mid-century antiquing in the world, really. But then we also have the world's largest flea market that happens in Bulkville, New York.
That's fun.
The Adirondacks has a giant flea market. So there's everything from thrift stores to high-end antiques across New York State.
Oh wow, and thrift stores are a big deal. People love thrift stores,
Oh yeah,
you know, and it's a way of
I'm
not
married
throwing
to a
things
thrifter.
away. Yeah, yeah, you're into it, right? Well, come on. I mean, it's recycling, it's upcycling, however you look at it, and it's keeping history alive. I look at it that way.
Yeah, for
Just
sure.
different clothes and things like that. So much history. Okay, before you go, I want to ask, what about bookshops? Since you've got so many famous authors, do you have good bookshops? Because that's something we'd love to see our country embrace more of, is going to actual bookshops.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's connected to that idea of the small towns, right? The idea
Yeah.
of, you go to these main streets and very often there's a bookshop, in Lake Placid I was mentioning, for all the
Mhm.
Olympic history, but it also has a really beautiful main street. It actually looks like kind of like an alpine village. It's right on Mirror Lake. And so year round, it's beautiful. In the winter, they're dog sledding on the lake that you could go on a dog sled ride. But in the summer, you're paddle boating on that lake. But on
Oh,
that
cool.
main street, there's a library and a bookshop. That a lot of these towns have these cute little bookstores because it's a passion project for so many people. They have
Yeah,
the dream of one day, going with their books, and that's what they want to do all day is recommend books to people. So there's a lot
yeah,
of that.
I know. Isn't that be just like a nice way to, have wine events at night and tea during the day? I don't know. Just sounds like a good thing. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ross. It has been a pleasure having you on the show and learning so much about what New York State has to offer. I love New York. Can't beat that slogan, right?
No,
So
that's what we love
I,
hearing that. Thank you.
I love it. I love it. Everyone, iloveny.com is the website, and go and start planning, because all these events, you got to get moving on it. It's gonna, hotel rooms and all of that they're gonna fill up, and definitely want to go hiking at the Adirondacks. That's calling me for sure. When I hear about your state, I'm like, we need to go there as park people. And it sounds like it's a good place to go watch the night sky and things like that too. So, all right. Well, thank you so much and Happy New Year.
Great, thanks.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's Food, Wine, and Travel Show, featuring members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. We encourage you to visit their website. We say IFWTWA, which is IFWTWA.org. You can also follow us at bigblendradio.com. Happy travels, everyone!